Your book is called A Scurry of Squirrels.
Yep.
But to a certain extent, it's a misnomer. It's not really just about squirrels, is it?
No, it isn't, but it is predominantly. The squirrels are the thread that runs through the whole thing, really. But no, it's got a few other things in. It's all about the wildlife rehabilitation, and obviously about some of the other animals and birds that I have, so owls and lots of things to do with hedgehogs and also raising a few issues with wildlife, some of the things I come across in my work, attitudes, people's attitudes and things like that. So wanted to include that, plus a little bit about my background and how I came to be doing this sort of thing.
How did you become... rehabilitating animals is not a straightforward thing to do. I genuinely believe it requires quite a range of skills, but you also, I think, have to have almost a demeanour in the first place. There's something, you have to have something that animals find agreeable, which you obviously do.
I know. I think I've always... It's very difficult because you look at yourself and you don't want to say, well, I think I've got a way with animals. But I increasingly see that where other people can't deal with animals, I seem to be able to. Wanted to be a vet, so the medical side of it was always there, but I just don't have the scientific brain to go with that, and I would never have passed those kind of exams that would have allowed me to be a vet, which is very disappointing. So I suppose my mother was always very keen on wildlife, so she would find things and I would learn from her. She wouldn't have done wildlife rehabilitation full-time, but she was very, very keen on hand-rearing things, and she had a bit of a knack with it too, I would say. And then I suppose I really took it to a different level, whereas I just sort of really dedicated myself to lots of things, and I just found it absolutely fulfilling. I mean, some people say it's a lack in you that you want to...
Oh, no.
You know, they sometimes say, well, do you do it for yourself? But I think increasingly now I really do it for the wildlife. I mean, we make such a mess with wildlife, and all the problems that I see with wildlife have usually been caused by us. So it's great if you can try to rectify that and put back a little bit of... But you know, there's a lot of failure with wildlife rehab. Huge amount.
I've seen you taking squirrels in the past. I mean, you better introduce this one. Who is this?
Yes.
Hello.
So
He's back again. Here you go.
Back again. Excuse me. This is a wee squirrel called Tommy Dewar, because he came from Dewar's Distillery in Aberfeldy. And funnily enough, he arrived the night before I released the two squirrels that I had, and I had just made the comment, gosh, I'm really going to miss those two because I'd had them a long time, when this wee thing arrived, and he was very weak and frail and cold, and his eyes were only just opening. So he will get released. You can see now he's incredibly tame, but obviously we're interacting a lot with him at the moment because he hasn't got any, he needs to learn to play, and he's just getting a wee bit nibbly. So he should go back to the wild, no problem. Whether I release him at home or whether I take him back up to Cluny Gardens, where Cluny is such a great place for releasing squirrels, and I've done that in the past. We've got a lot more going on in this area now, and some of these hand-reared squirrels are not just as streetwise as some of the wild ones.
Yeah, great.
So I'll put him where I think it's best for him,
Tommy looks like a squirrel.
Yes.
He's furry and he's got a bushy tail and everything else, but I've seen you take stuff in that's just absolutely tiny. How do you feed something that small?
Yes, I mean, when you get those really tiny ones, my heart sinks when I see them when they're that small. That is really a dedicated thing. You just have to say, right, well, sleep is out the window basically, and increasingly as I get older, I'm not so good without my sleep. So I find myself being quite dysfunctional by lunchtime if I've had to get up several times in the night. But that's what you have to do. And you have to be very careful to get the milk right. You have to really make sure that you don't overfeed, and that is very difficult. It's as bad as underfeeding. Yes, I've had those very naked ones that you saw that were just tiny, and that was a real challenge, and I didn't actually think we'd win with that. But I think the secret to that was those wee squirrels that came to me. They were about 4 days old, so they'd had their mother's colostrum, which is the first milk that the mother produces, and that is full of antibodies. I think if you try to hand rear things that haven't had colostrum, so if they're just immediately born, then I'd fail.
But they're quite helpless at that age. I mean, they can't even really toilet themselves.
No, they can't. You have to stimulate them to pass urine and to defecate.
Tell me how.
How? I use a damp cotton bud with warm water, and you just literally just gently touch the area, and it works brilliantly. They immediately pee. Or
presumably, the mother would lick.
She would lick them to do that, and it's the same.
There are limits to even your dedication.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not going to do that.
They are, but you have to try and emulate all the things the mother would do in the wild, and that's what's really, really difficult. And so when I'm out wandering about watching squirrels, because obviously I watch squirrels a lot and try to study what they do, you want to see how they react with other squirrels and that sort of thing, and you hope that you learn to. I mean, obviously I haven't seen baby squirrels in the wild in their dray, but I think you see enough video footage of that sort of thing, and you see it with other animals. There's a lot of licking and a lot of that sort of thing goes on with all mammals.
You did something with a wee sable brush,
yes.
A little artist brush.
Yeah, but because I don't lick my baby squirrels, obviously I wanted to think of some ways to soothe them, because one of the things that kills animals that you are hand rearing is stress. Stress is a really big killer. So you try to make the thing as relaxed and as calm and as content as you can. And I think, who doesn't like being rubbed down with a sable brush? It's very gentle, and it has a sort of soporific effect on them. It was an experiment, and then I discovered that they really love it. He's just he's quite cheeky. Still got a lot of growing to do. You can see he's got. Is that the first time you've been sort of had the squirrel interacting with you quite so much?
Not as, but you remember, I think it must have been 3-4 years ago, I was in here.
And they were a bit bigger, weren't they?
Yeah, but they were basically using me as a climbing frame.
Yes.
This is different. This is just exploration. This is just keeping him company. And he's got a right itchy lug for some reason.
Yes, he's got a slightly funny bit on the top of his lug, and I don't know what he's done. He was quite scruffy when he came in, and he's beginning to look better. He's been a different squirrel because he kind of weaned himself. He suddenly decided he didn't want the milk anymore, and normally there's quite an overlap, but every squirrel's different.
If you see those feet, they almost look arthritic, the joints.
Yes,
I mean,
they do.
They're quite extraordinary.
That's a good description.
Well, and it's, the almost claws, but not, like raptor's claws. That could climb up anything.
I know, it's extraordinary. And he grips onto really nothing, you know. But I mean, you can see the big hind feet and the double-jointed ankles. And he doesn't seem to have any visible, certainly, but everyone talks about hedgehogs having fleas. Well, squirrels have even
Squirrels
more.
have fleas.
Yes, I'll tell you that after you've...
yes, big fleas have little fleas upon their backs to bite them, little fleas have littler fleas, and so ad infinitum.
You got that out of my book, too.
No, I didn't. Well, I did.
It's in there,
I knew it, is it?
Yes, it is, because I think it's a cracking thing.
It's a great thing.
You say it again?
Big fleas have little fleas upon their backs to bite them. Little fleas have littler fleas, and so ad infinitum.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It really, really is. And it actually explains how everything is interconnected.
Yeah. Hello.
You're the climbing frame now.
Yeah. Well, we came in here for a start, and we were thinking, we'll do this in the garden, or we'll do this up in the wood, or we can do this, in the badger walk, or something like that. But you don't have a huge amount of land here, but you've done a tremendous amount with it.
Yeah,
Talk me through some of that.
Yeah, I wanted to include some of that in the book because I wanted to encourage people that you can do. I don't like the word rewilding. I prefer habitat restoration or ecological restoration because that's what it is really. Rewilding's got a lot of connotations attached to it that a lot of people, they hackles rise, which is silly because it really just means, repairing the environment. And so when I came here, it was very impoverished and very bare, and I wanted to plant trees. That had been one of my goals. I always wanted to plant lots of trees and make a mini nature reserve. And so that's what we did, and we got a whole lot of trees when I first came here, due to the foot and mouth of
in my pocket.
2000.
Sorry, somewhat distracted by a squirrel in my pocket. Get out of that. Go on.
They love pockets because it's lovely and cosy.
It's like a dray in there.
It's a dray.
Like
You've got a dray in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to think what I have got in my pocket. What did I have in my pocket? Yeah.
Like, never work with animals and children. It's great. So that's great. Well, you probably go to sleep in there now.
Yeah, quite not bad.
So I wanted to improve the habitat for wildlife and see what would come back. And there weren't any squirrels here. I mean, this garden where we sit here planted all these trees, except the elms at the back. And amazing, the squirrels started to come into the garden all the time. And I remember that first day that we got a squirrel coming to the feeder and we're just absolutely ecstatic. And now some days we have 10, 15 squirrels in the garden. Good years.
Is it just native species that you planted here?
No, it was to begin with, and then I've added a few others, but it is predominantly native species, and then I added a few things that were specifically for wildlife, things that would do well for wildlife, but it is mostly native species, yeah. But I'm not a purist on that front. We've got some larch and things like that, because they're absolutely wonderful trees as well. I mean, see, so many things love larch. But yes, a lot of oaks and a lot of rowan. Love rowan, it's wonderful.
So if I'd come
Aspen.
here, say, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, what would this have looked like?
Well, it was the people who'd been here before had been here about 30, 35 years, and it had been very heavily overgrazed, and so a lot of wandering sheep from up above had come down as well and eaten a lot of the trees. So it was very bare, obviously woods around me, but the fields here were incredibly bare. So hedges was another thing I wanted, because I feel it's very important to have wildlife corridors.
Oh, exactly, aren't they?
Yeah.
Literally corridors where wildlife can move safely from point A to point B without being exposed.
And that's what we're really lacking in this country. I mean, the hedges are ripped out all the time, and that's why hedgehogs are struggling so much, because as their name suggests, they really, really need hedgerows. You're getting cheeky now and biting. So that was really the aim. I mean, I'd love to have been able to do it on a really grand scale, but it's great to have done it on a small scale. And I wanted to write about that because I wanted to inspire other people to do it. Even in a garden, just not mowing so much and not mowing so low. It's amazing what you get. Moths and butterflies and all the invertebrates. And if we don't have those, we have nothing else.
Yeah. It's interesting, we tend to get excited about big visible stuff like this, but everything that you might put below this in a pyramid is utterly essential, and if you don't have the right circumstances for them, this can't thrive.
Absolutely, and people love red squirrels, but they don't seem to realise that the red squirrel sort of indicates, if you have a lot of red squirrels, then there are obviously a lot of other things as well. So they are a real litmus paper for the health of the area and the environment, So they're very important. It likes your bag. And squirrels are, the Highland Perthshire where we are is very good. We've got a lot of squirrels, but as you know, they're on the edge, really. It wouldn't take much to wipe them out. We've got all the issue with the greys and all the problems with the disease, and, they are struggling. And it's loss of habitat, and the corridors where they can move safely have been lost. So there may be an island of red squirrels, but that will soon die out if they don't have new blood coming in and they're, a good food supply.
You've been doing this for a long time, and you've been writing about it for a long time, and you've been enthusing other people about it for a long time. Are you getting a feeling now that things are changing, that that the general public will say, actually, we could do this?
I think they are. I think things are changing. I mean, I think all of us would like things to, who are on this sort of wildlife trajectory, would like things to change a lot quicker than they are. But we have to accept that, these things do take time. Get very frustrated with some of the laws that they take so long to change when you can see how bad they are. But yes, I think things are changing. And, I meet a lot of people on my travels, a bit like you, when I'm interviewing people from my work. You meet wonderful people who are doing fantastically inspirational things. And there are a lot of organisations, bigger organisations, that are planting trees on a grand scale. And I think it's important for people to realise that we can all contribute to it. Even in a small way, we can all contribute to helping this environmental crisis. However small your input is, it has to be better than nothing.
One of the things that always concerns me is that, you're right, we talk to a lot of lovely people, and, many of them have badges, many of them have got sweatshirts, many of them have got, the branded jackets telling you which environmental charity they actually come from. that's not a boundary as such, but it'd be quite nice if lots of people suddenly thought, oh yeah, we can do this.
Yeah.
You know, to a certain extent, that's what I got the feeling about your book. It was just it is encouraging people. It's saying you don't have to have a huge amount of ground. You don't have to have a huge amount of knowledge. You can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I have issues with, I've always made it my policy slightly to not join too many organisations. Or, I mean, there are one or two that I
wouldn't belong to any club that would have you as a member.
Exactly. But because there's so much infighting and so much time is wasted where people are all doing conservation work, but they don't get on. And it's the same with the grouse shooting and the shooting issues. You know, these terrible vitriolic exchanges are not going to get us anywhere. We need to sit down round a table and listen, because everybody has a different agenda. And I think that's always bothered me a lot, that it becomes so heated. That achieves nothing, as you know.
When you planted all the stuff here, I mean, you know, and it goes right the way up the hill, and you're lucky that you got running water going down through. This used to be what was it, an old carpet mill or something?
Yes, it was. This whole village was mills, and our house was a carpet mill. There were lint mills as well in this wee village.
But you know, it's not just the trees. I mean, you've got a remarkably rich and diverse undercroft. Did you plant that as well?
No, because things came back once we took the
After how
grazing.
long?
Well, I mean, the most extraordinary thing was the bluebells. They have come back, and all the wood flora, so things like primroses and wood anemones. And as the trees came up, the ground flora changed. So there were, to begin with, you know, orchids came, and then the canopy began to close in, and then you've got the woodland species. So they've been lying dormant there for centuries, probably. Extraordinary.
Which is really, really remarkable.
Well, it is, because if you go up onto the hills, you know, the Western Isles and places, I mean, we've just been in Isla, and the bluebells that were coming up, and pieces of a hill where you knew that was previously woodland. I mean, it is extraordinary. They're great indicators.
And much the same way that you can very often find ruins in the hill of former habitation by looking for something like nettles.
Yes, extraordinary. Yeah. There you are.
I thought you said he was going to go to sleep. You lied.
He's really enjoying himself, just having a bit of company. So he'll have to have a lot of social distancing before long, and get him roughed off. But just at this stage, he does need to have some interaction to get him playing and agile. But he's certainly agile.
Did you set off? I mean, when you started to write the book, did you set off? Because I mean, there's a lot of you in it. Did you set off for it to be that way?
Well, I think the publisher was very keen for me to include that sort of thing.
Did they tell you that in the beginning?
Yes, they did.
They did.
No, they did. They did.
Just sneak it up on you halfway.
No, it didn't actually this time. You know, they wanted to know quite a lot about what other things were coming in. I suppose to broaden the interest as well, but also because the squirrels and all these other things are connected to them. You know, it's all part of it. But obviously I wanted to tell people a lot about squirrels and about their natural history, and also about their history, which is fascinating. I mean, it was still possible to persecute these wee things until 1981. Well, I mean, in 1981, that's in our memory, isn't it? Very, very much.
Well in our memory.
Yeah. And then do you remember the Tufty Club and things like that?
I had the badge.
I did too.
I had the badge. Look left,
Should have
look
worn
right,
it
look
today.
left again.
And ironic now that, you know, Tufty, who was the campaigner for road safety for children, can do nothing for the wee red squirrels that get run over. Every time I see these wee young red squirrels run over on the road, and a lot of squirrel kits get run over every year. You know, it's something ironic about it, isn't it?
But that's probably the obvious side of the coin. You're very good at what you do because you can empathise. You can look at what, you know, a real mummy squirrel would do, mimic it, copy it, you know, use it, you know, basically to give this wee thing a chance. That empathy, however, is a double-edged sword. So that when something does get run down in the drive, that must be really difficult.
It's really heartbreaking. It really is. I mean, there was a hedgehog run over on the bridge in Aberfeldy, the Wade Bridge, which, as you know, there's traffic lights on it, so it's very sad. How did somebody run over a hedgehog in the middle of the bridge? You know, people fly, and, you know, when you let things go, you do, as you say, it's a double-edged sword. There's the euphoric moment that actually you've got things to that stage, but then it's just fraught with, oh, will they be all right? I mean, we've just recently released a leveret that you saw, and that was a hard one. You know, well, we had to find somewhere where they don't shoot hares, obviously, and away from roads. So it's very difficult. It is difficult. It's very, very hard. Hedgehogs are probably the worst because they do really, you know, at least in the trees, squirrels can get away from things, but hedgehogs are really vulnerable. Probably the worst of all.
Summarise the book for me. I mean, what one message would you like people to take from it?
Well, there is one message, you know, the big message in it is that if we don't look after our wildlife then and our nature, we're nothing. You know, we are part of nature, and we should stop seeing ourselves as being separate or above nature. We've got to realise that it all is interconnected and includes us, and we can all live together. We have to give nature space. I mean, the farming issue is very sad because so many farmers I knew many years ago, you know, they farmed with nature, but they've been so squeezed, and I don't blame the farmers. I blame the political situation, you know, that farmers are so squeezed. So I think we've got to go back to that. It's almost like now nature has to pay rent for being where it was before. Wildlife has to pay rent. And I think that the message I have is that, you know, also we must continue to talk to each other and not get so polarised, because everybody has a different agenda. Everybody wants something different from the world, from, you know, everybody's values. I think yours and mine are pretty similar, to be honest, but, you know, lovely blackbird singing.
Yeah, just that time of night.
But I think we've got to realise that we have to look after nature, and it's no good thinking it's somebody else's job. It's our job. Every single one of us can do something, and that's a very important message. I think we've got to teach our children too, and both you and I can encourage young children we come across and young people. If they don't know about the natural world, we can open that door for them, and hopefully we've then got another advocate for looking after the natural world. I think that's really important.